Let me start by talking about the Teals again. They really are a case study on what's wrong with politics, aren't they? Lots of complaints, but no solutions. Behaving like a party when it comes to funding, staffing, policies and voting, but claiming to be merely a disconnected gaggle of independents. Criticising the funding of major parties, but being caught out breaking the rules and even hiding donations from family fortunes based on coal mining, for instance. And as I showed you the other night, trying to deliver for voters on dog parks and watchmakers when their main promise was to somehow save the planet. Look, it's easy to laugh at the Teals, but we have to take them seriously and provide proper scrutiny, especially when they won their way into Parliament with pledges like this.
And I stand for integrity, decency and honesty. I will always hold our government to account for its actions.
That was the Teal candidate for Kooyong in Melbourne, Monique Ryan, now the member for Kooyong. She tossed out the then Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. And you heard her, she was big on integrity, honesty and accountable government. Let's have a look at how this is playing out on tax. Remember, before the election, the Labor Party supported and voted for the Morrison government's tax cut legislation. Legislation presented by Frydenberg, endorsed by Labor, all stages of it, including the Stage 3 tax cuts to come in 2024. A Kooyong constituent, a Liberal Party member, Tim Gillespie, wrote to Ryan during the campaign asking about policies. In part, he asked, firstly, what are your detailed tax policies? Do you wish to raise taxes in any area? If so, what areas? Good questions, right? And I think we can all agree that axing legislated tax cuts is in fact a very clear case of increasing taxes. So have a look at the response sent to that query from Ryan's office, not directly from her office, effectively dismissing any taxation concerns. Ryan would advocate for the values and interests of the electorate, said her staffer, and hold accountable whoever was in government. Ryan would not be making tax policies. Now that's pretty clear, isn't it? No tax changes and holding any government to account. But roll forward beyond the election and into August, and suddenly Ryan had a tax policy. In August, she tweeted that the Stage 3 tax cuts make no economic sense and that we need to respond to the reality of our circumstances and prioritise assistance for people on low incomes. Hang on a second. Both major parties had voted for this tax package. Both had promised to keep these tax cuts during the election campaign. And Ryan had denied having any tax policies. And she promised to hold them to account. And yet now she's out there campaigning to keep higher taxes on the people of Kooyong, the majority of whom would get some benefit from these tax cuts. Listen to her this week.
I think people understand that the Stage 3 tax cuts were legislated at a time before we had $1 trillion in debt and before we saw the cost of living and inflationary pressures on the economy that we're seeing at the moment. And I think people understand that a government's role is to respond to the challenges that it sees in front of it.
But hang on, the budget has only improved, and dramatically so, since the election. There is not $1 trillion worth of government gross debt, and net debt is about half that. And the actual budget position has improved by over $50 billion since the election. $50 billion. But Ryan seeks to paint a different picture, to justify a blatant, broken promise when she was elected promising no tax policy, a focus on integrity and holding government to account. Listen to her now. In fact, listen to this twice.
I think Australians are mature enough to understand that governments can sometimes need to change their mind. I think Australians are mature enough to understand that governments can sometimes need to change their mind.
Mature enough? Mature enough now to accept broken promises? Doesn't she remember this?
And I stand for integrity, decency and honesty. I will always hold our government to account for its actions.
Pre-election, it's all integrity, honesty and holding governments to account. Pre-election, it's no tax policy and no tax plans. And then once in Parliament, Ryan is on about how we are all mature enough to break promises and increase taxes. Look, the good people of Kooyong, you can't say you weren't warned. I guess it's just like Ryan being so bossy in Parliament about COVID face masks and other people having to wear them, and then soon afterwards being exposed as a bare-faced partygoer. You have to forget what Ryan says and only judge her by what she does. You know, the same old cynicism, the same old politics. The Teals are just like all the other politicians, only they claimed to be different.